Hi everyone, Dr. Ferrarini here, and what I'm going to do is to show you how to use the build-its that are available in your Cengage MindTap. These build-its are really an important part of how to kind of master the main concepts in macroeconomics. To just refresh, we looked in Chapter 7 about what GDP is, both nominal and real GDP. It's a measurement of the total economic activity across the economy, including the output and services provided by all of the sectors. If you look at nominal GDP, you're looking at current values. If you look at real GDP, it's constant values using base year prices. Understand the differences between those. It's important to know what an economy produces, because what the economy produces in at the present and how it compares to the potential will influence things like income and unemployment rates and the things that matter. So understand the basic terms and definitions that are presented in Chapter 7 and 8 and know how to calculate GDP, nominal and real, unemployment rate, know the difference between GDP and national income, understand that they're connected, that what's produced in the nation means that income is being earned by the owners of the resources that are used to produce the goods and services. With that, now let's go into Chapter 9. Chapter 9 starts our graph analysis. And once you have read the material on the introduction to basic macroeconomics with focus on aggregate demand and aggregate supply, you'll want to go in and kind of get a good feel for the larger picture. And these videos are very helpful, especially for the audio-visual learners out there. And they'll help you kind of get a broad perspective and visualize what it is that's going to be presented and reduced to models about aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Now, these under practices, once you've expanded it, you'll see that you'll have opportunity to build graphs. And in this instance, in this chapter, we're talking about aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So I'm going to click on the aggregate demand curve just to give you an experience or a touch point with the build it curve. What's really good about these build-its build-its in the practical application is it'll give you a description of what is graphed. In this case, we're talking about aggregate demand. We're talking about the quantity of goods and services that are produced for consumers, for businesses, for the government, and for the international sector. And on our x-axis or horizontal axis, we place goods and services or real GDP. And we just denote that with Y, and I know it's kind of confusing having a capital Y on the x-axis or the horizontal axis, but just hopefully you can remember that. And then on our vertical axis here, or Y-axis, we have the price level. Now, the price level is aggregate prices. It's prices across the economy. It's not the price of one good or service. And we'll talk about the price level as it relates to other prices, for example, interest rates and foreign exchange rates, and the list will go on, and we'll journey through all of the relationships between the price level and those other prices for money and for currency as the course moves on. Now, the next piece is what's really good is this exercise will help you distinguish between a movement along the aggregate demand curve, a change in quantity aggregate demanded, or a change in the price level. And if there's a change in the price level, only the change in the aggregate price level will cause a change in real GDP down here. Okay, just remember that. That's kind of a rule of thumb. So reduction in the price level, and we usually use the consumer price level from CPI 1 to CPI 2, will result in an increase in the quantity of goods and services demanded in real terms. That means that the quantities have been valued using their base year prices. Okay, so understand what an aggregate demand curve is, be able to interpret it, and then once you've done that, then click on the next piece here and basically try to graph your own aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve. So in this economy, It says the graph represents the demand for goods and services in an economy. P1 is the equilibrium price right here, P1, and we have the equilibrium real GDP level, and that's Y2. When we move on, we say, okay, what happens when prices fall? That is across the economy. We'll see an increase. When prices fall, aggregate prices from P1 to P2, CPI falls from, let's say, 100 to 90, we'll see that there will be an increase in the quantity of goods and services in real terms produced by businesses for individuals living in household, personal consumption expenditures, for other businesses in terms of investment capital, for the government, for net exports, and the list will go on. So these are really helpful, and once you feel like you've got it, and other exercises, you'll be able to actually graph it. Now, in the chapter that we're looking at, chapter 9, there's a similar exercise with the aggregate supply curve. Please go in and understand what a short run aggregate supply curve is and what a long run aggregate supply curve is. In the long run, we're operating at full potential. We're using our resources efficiently. As you saw in exam 1, efficiency implies that we're operating on that production's possibilities frontier. We're not straining or stressing our resources. We're using them to achieve maximum value, that is the quantity relative to the prices the consumers are willing to pay. In the short run, we're not always operating in the perfect world where people can respond immediately to changes, and we're focusing, because this is aggregate supply, on what businesses and firms do. And in the short run, when we have contracts and it takes time for people to absorb changes in the dynamic economy, higher prices may motivate some producers or firms to increase the quantity of the goods and services that they produce. But this is a short run phenomenon. Why is that? Because it's not efficient to produce over and beyond that production's possibilities frontier. So remember we had that production's possibilities frontier. When you're operating on it, it's ideal. When you're operating just outside of it, it's inefficient, and you're stressing and straining your 4 key resources: the land or natural resources, the labor, the capital, and the entrepreneurial talent. So the short run phenomena is just that. So if we had a CPI of 95 and for whatever reason it increased because of a surge in aggregate demand and it rose to 100, we would see some producers trying to overproduce beyond their production's possibilities frontier, stressing and straining resources, but eventually prices will rise, wages will increase, and we'll see that will contract. We'll always navigate towards that long run aggregate supply curve. So again, if you're trying to build a short run aggregate supply curve, you can go through the steps using this exercise, and you can go and compare the short run aggregate supply curve movements along it to the long run aggregate supply curve. And this is a really good way to visualize and get practice and break down, in this instance, the differences between the short and the long run. So this is part of my goal today, is to show you the wonderful resources that are available here in MindTap, in addition to your homework. And if you also think that you've got everything to test your knowledge, you just want to go into the apply it, check on the relevant chapters, and you'll be able to get a short we're in chapter 9 here, we can get a short study it exercise, and you go through, and if you're looking to kind of test your general knowledge, you just go through and submit and review and see what you know. And let's say we offer incorrect answers, I should have probably clicked 10. Then what'll happen is once you submit and review, then if you get wrong answers, you can go in, and I intentionally did that, you can identify additional resources in the book to learn better what it is that you didn't understand when you provided an answer, and it takes you directly to the right spot in the textbook. So this is a great resource. Anyway, I hope to see all of you tonight at today's review session. Happy learning. Dr. Ferrarini signing off here.